Among the world's most dire calamities, yet also among the most ignored, is climate change. Despite being heavily emphasized in Western media for years, climate initiative generally remains tepid in the Western world. It's easy to turn a blind eye to disaster when those who suffer the most are poor, disadvantaged, and live within the global economic periphery. Studies into climate change victimization have concluded that vulnerable groups such as women, children, and people with disabilities are among the most at risk of severe climate change impacts. A 2023 research paper by Bethuel and Ngcamu found that government initiatives in vulnerable countries are unable to sufficiently capacitate vulnerable groups to participate in interventions to avoid the disastrous impacts of climate change. Despite this apparent ignorance of climate change in the West, it remains a constant political fixture in the Western political social rhetoric. As a result, most Canadians are aware of climate change and its associated issues. The purpose of this video is to explore climate change awareness in Tanzania, alongside the scope of the issue and the socio-political implications. My name is Polisky. I'm a Canadian International Studies student, and I spent 6 short weeks in Tanzania, traveling the country, meeting different people, and learning as much as I possibly could about climate change awareness in Tanzania. As a traveler, I believe it's important to meet with locals as frequently and as often as possible, regardless of the context. But in Tanzania, I found it especially poignant. I walked the streets with an open mind and open ears, hungry for new perspectives, but I found what I was looking for in a town north of Dar es Salaam called Mbweni. I stayed in Mbweni for 2 weeks, living with a local family in exchange for work at a school, where I worked while making connections with the local inhabitants of the town. What I wanted to know the most urgently was whether or not climate change posed a serious threat, whether or not there were actual ramifications of climate change being felt by people in Tanzania. About this subject, I spoke with almost anyone I could, including climate nonprofit organizations, Maasai elders, teachers, vendors on the street, anyone who I could get an ear from. However, before I could even do that, the evidence of climate change in Mbweni struck me almost immediately. The locality's road infrastructure, devastated by floods, had been rutted into what more resembled World War I trenches than any road I was familiar with. The vehicle used to transport children to and from the school that I worked at would frequently be damaged by these abusive conditions.
The rainfall used to be enough for production. So people would plant the seasonal crops like maize or grains like beans, and they do it. But since the climatic change, this season has been unpredictable. Yeah, so one of the great impact which you can see is lack of rain.
Mainstream studies confirm what Joseph has indicated here. A 2022 research paper from the International School of Research and Business and Social Science reported that 68% of East Africans were aware of increased drought, while 85% were aware of changing weather patterns, and 91% were aware of higher temperatures. Furthermore, the same study confirmed that 72% of survey respondents were very interested in climate change risks and learning more. So I've explored the real impacts of climate change in Tanzania, but what about awareness?
So are Tanzanians aware of global warming?
Yeah, we are trying to do education here in school. We are teaching them about global warming and the effects of global warming and the things with the industries and the smoke from industries and so kind of.
Okay.
Yes.
Like if you go talk to like the average person just out here in Kimbani, do you think they would know about it?
Not much, maybe out of 10, maybe 3.
In Dar es Salaam or Arusha, do you think people here have been educated about climate change?
They may be aware, but in a different way from an educated person could explain. For instance, they really know that the seasons are no longer the same like it used to be. This they know. They really know that rain is unpredictable. This they know. But they also know about long season of drought. They know. And they know that there is also shortage of food, different from previous years. So they know about these changes. But if you give them in paper to explain, somebody may fail to explain what is a climatic change, but lives in the experience of the impact of the climate change. So if you ask him, like, you be specific and you say, what is the difference between the production in the last a number of years to current, they will explain it clearly. It can be explained by the livestock keepers, agriculturalists, the farmers, cultivators. They can explain.
Countries like Tanzania have large rural and urban divides that form social cleavages. Both communities face different issues related to climate change effects.
So there's a difference in how awareness should be pursued between rural and urban communities.
Absolutely. There are so many means of transferring information in town, different from in the villages. So I think we have to study and know what is the best means of educating the people in the village about the climatic change, though they act a lot on the environment. Because if you talk of the livestock keepers, they are in the villages. If you talk of the farmers, they're in the villages. They don't know that doing, cultivating, still following the slope is dangerous for the environment. They don't know that. What they know is only tilling the land and put the seeds, then expecting to get products, you see.
Anecdotal observations on climate change awareness may differ, likely indicating unique community-lived experiences. However, the statistics speak for themselves. In this graph, provided by Afrobarometer, respondents were asked if over the past 10 years, if there has been any change to the severity of the following events in the area. In this next graph, respondents were asked if they heard about climate change. In essence, climate change awareness is generally low, and academic studies have confirmed this. ELIA's 2019 work, Media Coverage of Climate Change Information in Tanzania, found that climate change reporting in Tanzania is minimal and will remain low as journalists face a myriad of challenges when reporting on the climate. According to Siao and Sife 2018, climate change reporting in Tanzania is disproportionately low compared to the level of threat, raising questions on the Tanzanian dedication to climate change awareness. During my time with Simon Fraser University's Tanzania Field School cohort, I had the opportunity to travel with colleagues and talk to NGOs across the country. One of these NGOs was an organization called Climate Hub, a youth-based climate awareness movement from Dar es Salaam, who, when asked, informed me that they believe 60 to 70% of youth in the country lack a basic understanding of climate change. The Climate Hub meeting helped us to understand the state of climate change awareness in Tanzania. However, it also shined a light on what's being done to combat climate change in the country. Tanzania's National Adaptation Plan is a 10-year mandate, containing the outline, strategy, cost, benefit, and overall structure of the country's plan to combat climate change. Whether the plan will actually be put into motion remains to be seen. However, anecdotal evidence from my meeting with the Climate Hub indicates that Tanzanians are not aware of the plan itself, and that it does not appear to be a high priority task for the national government. This begs the question, how are climate solutions perceived in Tanzania? My colleagues from Mbweni believe that education is the right place to start.
What do you think can be done in Tanzania to raise awareness?
All right. I think the first thing is to educate the people, the citizen, to the grassroots, mostly to the interior.
What do you think needs to be done to raise awareness about climate change?
I think they should do maybe education. Educating people and trying to, let's say, set up projects somehow on maybe centers or school, or just to emphasize on those such things.
So it can be, you think education is the best approach?
Yeah, sure.
Education may be a viable climate solution, but among the most visible solutions are the Tanzanian government's national level initiatives. Perhaps more difficult to ignore than a lack of education, Tanzania's climate policy is the principal climate initiative in the country, representing millions as the state exercises agency on the national level. Findings from a 2025 article by Sumari, Pauline, and Mague suggest that national climate projects tend to follow a certain structure. The 2025 article found that once the central government releases its priorities, they are sent to the regional level, where they're told to come up with projects that align with these priorities. The list from the regional level is then received and circulated to departments in the sub-regional district for them to pick the relevant projects. The whole process is a top-down series of events that are not quite conducive to climate awareness. However, certain NGOs that I met with had a different approach. In Arusha, I had the opportunity to meet with an organization called Recoda, an NGO dedicated to training local farmers to be climate change resistant. Recoda's approach is far more bottom-up. Starting with farmers, they practice microfinance, technology transfer, and awareness raising to provide their own solutions to climate change. Speaking with Recoda added nuance to my understanding of climate change awareness. As weather patterns become unpredictable and drought and flooding events become more frequent, different communities may be benefited or harmed by them. I learned from Recoda that farmers are among the most sensitive to climate change, and that certain aspects of global warming, such as climate-induced pests, have made the effects of climate change abundantly clear in these communities. After all of the interviews, research, and travel, I had one burning question. I wanted to know how Tanzanians felt about climate coloniality. I wanted to give my educated colleagues in Mbweni an opportunity to voice their own opinions.
I wanted to ask about, in school we have a term called climate justice, and it's the idea that it's not fair that Africans have to deal with the impacts of climate change when historically climate change was caused by emissions from Western countries. So I just wanted to know if you have any thoughts about that.
Dealing with the impact of climatic change should not be only the burden of Africa. I'm a teacher teaching history. There are some of the impacts which Africa is suffering today, but their root cause was not Africans themselves. If we could be standing on the fair ground, I think there are some of the countries in Europe should be responsible with the situation in Africa. There is a great contribution of the colonialists who colonized Africa. Yeah, I think there is a way that they prepared Africa to become like a dumping place. You understand? I say it just in a good way. That like Europe, they have a number of maybe a limit of the car, for instance, to be used in their countries. But where is this car going after the use? I know that sometimes maybe they write it off, but there are a number of cars which are used cars which are shipped to Africa, and they are running in Africa. They help us, yes, but they come with a lot of emission, isn't? They contribute to the climatic change, but we are only bothered with the landmarks, right? Not the sky marks. Do you see? Yeah. The sky is unlimitable.
So no one cares about emissions?
Nobody cares. The smoke produced in Europe can cross Africa. You understand? The impact in Europe can cross Africa. So because we have the developed countries and the developing countries, I think it is good if the developed country could contribute, especially to the programs of climatic change.
Climate coloniality, according to Farhana Sultana, is the re-embodiment and relocation of how, why, and who is responsible for climate change. According to Sultana, the climate is failing to merely change, it is being colonized and forced to change. The term climate justice refers to the equitable and social justice-based approach to climate change mitigation globally. By understanding climate justice in Tanzania, we can fill the gaps of our understanding in climate change awareness on the national level. In the words of Sultana in her book, The Unbearable Heaviness of Climate Coloniality, she says, "We are still colonized, but this time through climate change, the development industry and globalization are responsible." Sultana argued that decolonizing the climate needs to grapple with the complexities of colonialism, imperialism, capitalism, and the development in the reproduction of ongoing colonialities through existing global government structures. In terms of awareness, climate justice may not be at the top of the list in Tanzania, but the concept is important nevertheless. And I predict through my interviews that climate justice will continue to grow as a concept and will influence perceptions of climate change over time, as well as negotiations on the international level. Climate change awareness has demonstrated itself to be somewhat of an elusive topic that varies from community to community. In order to seek to understand it, I defined the real impact of climate change in Tanzania before exploring the role of media and NGOs in awareness. Next, I examined awareness of climate change solutions before finally asking the question of climate justice. The key takeaways from my research are that, while climate change awareness generally remains low in Tanzania, it appears to be higher in rural farming communities who are most directly affected. Many Tanzanians believe that the most impactful climate change solution is education, as awareness will benefit the nation's collective consciousness. There is a lot of work to be done in Tanzania, but I found inspiration there by the dozens of NGOs and passionate climate activists that I met with. It goes without saying that my time in Tanzania contributed to my understanding not just of climate change, but political sociology as a whole. I learned so much from my Tanzanian colleagues.